And for our second story for this edition of the Rolling Stone, we go to the beautiful state of New York, where the Supreme Court has just made an important ruling regarding religious freedom amid the coronavirus pandemic. I've said numerous things about the Supreme Court, and most of what the court does these days is dead flat wrong. But in this case, in a 5-4 decision, the court actually made the right decision. They did something right, proving that even a broken clock is right, at least twice a day. What happened is that the Catholic Diocese of Brooklyn and the Orthodox Jewish synagogues there, they had sued Governor Andrew Cuomo regarding some of his coronavirus decrees. Andrew Cuomo claimed when Brooklyn was in a quote-unquote red zone, meaning that there were a lot of cases of coronavirus concentrated in that borough. He decreed that synagogues, churches, etc., could only have 25 people in them at any time, including for services. Only 25 people. Now, the Catholic Diocese, Orthodox Jewish synagogues, like I said, sued, saying this violates our freedom of religion. This violates our religious liberty. And also, it's very hypocritical, Governor Cuomo, to say that we have these restrictions on us, but other institutions, other businesses, like grocery stores, have no such limitations put on them. They might be saying, yes, well, grocery stores are essential. That's where people buy food. Okay, but people are going to be much more tightly compacted in grocery stores, no matter how big the grocery stores are, simply because people go into the same aisles to get whatever it is that they're trying to get. People, by nature, are going to be much more tightly compacted in grocery stores than they would actually be in many of these churches or synagogues. Because some of these churches, and this was actually a point made by the court in the majority opinion, many of these churches, they can hold hundreds and hundreds of people. We're not talking about small country churches that, if you're really squeezing, you might be able to fit in 50, 75 people. These churches, these synagogues, they can hold hundreds and hundreds of people. And that's what they were saying. Hey, we can socially distance. We can all wear masks, we can all clean the pews and the seats, and we don't all have to be tightly compacted. We can actually do social distancing. So why can we only have 25 people? It was a really good point. And the Supreme Court, in a 5-4 decision, ruled for the Catholic Diocese of Brooklyn and for the Orthodox Jewish synagogue. So that's great news. That is good news up and down the line. Because even during a pandemic, you should be able to you still have your natural rights, which include your right to worship, your right to practice your religion freely and without hindrance. Now, again, that might mean that you have to make some sacrifices. You have to wear a mask. Maybe the churches can't be completely full. Maybe it can only be 50%, 75%, so that you're not all packed in there like sardines. But you cannot say that, oh, you're a church, you can only have 25 people there. But you, a grocery store, okay, you can have as many people as you want. It's particularly true when we remember that New York State, New York City, they allowed huge gatherings while this pandemic was going on. It just had to be for the right reasons, quote unquote. So if you'll remember, back in June, I believe, there was a 15,000 person march in New York City for quote unquote, and I kid you not here, black trans lives. 15,000 people. You even had health officials saying, well, these aren't really good to have because of the virus and all, but systematic oppression, systematic racism and homophobia, transphobia, etc., they are just as deadly or even more so than the virus. So it's perfectly okay for all of you to gather and protest and spread the virus amongst yourselves and therefore amongst other people. You can kill Granny. The people going to church, they're not allowed to kill Granny. Just a few weeks ago, when Joe Biden was declared the winner of the 2020 election by the media, you had parties in the streets, people in New York City, in Philadelphia, in Chicago, swarming together to celebrate the downfall of the quote-unquote despot Donald Trump. You've had riots in cities like Seattle and Portland and San Francisco and Los Angeles and Philadelphia for days now. In Portland, they had over 100 nights of quote-unquote unrest, i.e. violence. No one said anything about how these riots, these mobs, were health hazards because of the virus. No one said anything about that. So, in the simple issue of justice, the Catholic Diocese of Brooklyn and these synagogues were saying, you can't just turn a blind eye to this, but then come down on us with a hammer. So, but the Supreme Court did was very, very good. But listen to what Andrew Cuomo had to say in reaction to this ruling. This is from the New York Post. Quote, Cuomo, in a Thanksgiving Day conference call with reporters, insisted the order from the Supreme Court was moot because the houses of worship in question in the court battle are no longer in designated red and orange zones in Brooklyn and Queens, so the restrictions can no longer apply to them. Quote, this is Governor Cuomo. The Supreme Court made a ruling. It's more illustrative of the Supreme Court than anything else. It's irrelevant of any practical impact because of the zone they were talking about is moot. It expired last week. It doesn't have any practical effect. Unquote. I think that this is a huge eye-opener, gang. Not just because I think so, but it really truly is an eye-opener because this is a glimpse into the future. In the first place, just on the surface, listen to what he is saying. We have an elected official, Governor Cuomo, who's not just like the governor of Montana or a sparsely populated state like that. This is the governor of New York State. He is one of the most prominent and powerful governors in the country simply because he is the governor of New York State, one of the oldest and most populated states of our union. So whatever he says has more weight, unfortunately, than the governor of Nevada or the governor of Montana, okay? I mean, on paper, they are equal as human persons and equal because they're both governors. But at the same time, New York just carries more weight than Montana or Wyoming. I wish that wasn't so, but I don't make the rules. So we have a public official, the governor of New York State, no less, saying that a ruling by the United States Supreme Court is, in his own words, irrelevant. It doesn't matter. It's irrelevant. It's not even worth the time of day. This is astounding. The very same leftists who have treated the Supreme Court as the voice of God, as the Delphi Oracle, when it comes to Roe v. Wade, or Planned Parenthood versus Casey, or Lawrence versus Texas, or Griswold versus Connecticut, or the Obergefell decision, etc., etc., etc. These same people are now saying that this particular ruling is completely irrelevant. It doesn't matter. And that Not only, gang, does that undermine the authority and the role of the Supreme Court, okay, which it kind of does, but even more so, it shows us what is going to happen into the future. Because Andrew Cuomo knows that this ruling is not irrelevant because of something that I dislike intensely called precedent. Because legal precedent being the idea that once the court has ruled in a particular way in a particular case, all cases like that, the court must rule in the same way, or else the authority, the esteem, the prestige of the court is going to be put into question because, oh, they ruled like this in this one particular case, but then in this other case, which is the same kind of case, they ruled like this, then they ruled like this, then they ruled like this. They don't know what they're talking about. I hate precedent because precedent allows you to keep injustices going in perpetuity. So, for example, even though we know now that an unborn baby is a human person, the science is solid when it comes to that. The Supreme Court has still not ruled that Roe v. Wade is an unconstitutional Supreme Court decision because the prestige of the court is in question. That's why they don't want to rule against it. That's why when they had a chance to rule against Roe v. Wade and to reaffirm the right to life in 1992 in Planned Parenthood versus Casey, the court didn't do it. In fact, the court doubled down and said, absolutely not. Not only is there a right to abortion, but at the heart of liberty is the right to decide the very nature of the universe for your own personal worldview. That's Anthony Kennedy's infamous mystery clause of the majority opinion of that case. But precedent, okay, is unfortunately still a thing. So Andrew Cuomo knows that this ruling isn't irrelevant because even if these particular churches and synagogues are no longer affected by his decrees because they are no longer in a quote-unquote red zone, he knows damn well that that ruling has still set a precedent. So if more cases like this come before the Supreme Court, theoretically they are going to rule in the same way that it ruled here in this particular instance. So you have that. But then comes the real chestnut of the matter, which is the fact that when the Supreme Court made a ruling that Governor Cuomo did not like, he dismissed it entirely as irrelevant. Because that's what happened here, gang. Andrew Cuomo dismissed the Supreme Court and its ruling as irrelevant. And by extension, he dismissed freedom of religion and the Constitution as irrelevant. And like I said at the beginning, gang, this is important because I firmly believe that this is giving us a preview into the future, because not only did the Supreme Court establish a precedent in this case, but so did Andrew Cuomo. Now, anytime anyone on the left comes up against a decision from the Supreme Court or any other organ or institution in our society that contradicts the left's philosophy, its agenda, its goals, will simply be dismissed. Andrew Cuomo not so subtly told the Supreme Court what Andrew Jackson told the Supreme Court in regarding its rulings about the Cherokee Indians, and the court telling Jackson that, hey, you can't move them from their lands in South Carolina and Georgia. You can't move them to Oklahoma. That's unconstitutional. And Jackson responded, the Supreme Court has made its decision. Now let's see it enforce it. Andrew Cuomo has just done that. He's basically told the court the same thing. Now, I think that this is only going to snowball, and it's only going to get worse, because now that Cuomo has led the way, everyone else on the left is going to do it too, especially because Andrew Cuomo has he's kind of almost entered the George Floyd arena of myth. He is the governor who, quote unquote, saved his state. He's going to be awarded a special Emmy, didn't you know, for using television to calm the nerves of the people of his state. Time is considering him as their person of the year. He's one of their contestants. So the fact that this great public servant, Andrew Cuomo, told the Supreme Court to basically take a hike is going to be seen as a call to arms by everyone on the left. And that means when everyone on the left is going to simply be picking and choosing which Supreme Court decisions they're going to follow, which ones they're going to ignore, and which ones they aren't going to, this in and of itself is going to exasperate our move towards civil war or social anarchy, in a sense, because if one side can pick and choose which decisions it wants to follow and which ones it's going to ignore, then that means that both sides are going to be able to, not only as a matter of justice, but simply as a matter of practicality. You're going to be a fool to say, oh, well, the other side gets to pick and choose what it wants to follow and what it wants to do, but not me. I'm going to follow all of them, even when that hurts you, even when you know that some of those rulings are immoral. And that, of course, is going to lead to our institutions and our systems losing whatever little bit of prestige they had left. And personally, I would usually say that this is a bad thing. But you know where I stand now, gang, on the issue of revolution. Maybe this is going to be a silver lining. Maybe this is actually going to help bring about that revolution that I've been talking about, which will allow us to refound the country on its founding principles. I can only hope. But it's interesting to see. It's interesting to contemplate here at the close of 2020 that Governor Cuomo, acting like, well, basically a spoiled brat, might actually be one of the sparks to the movement that is going to refound the country. It's an amazing thing to think about. That is story number 2.